Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Alex Bravin. I'm the Projects Director of M3 Marine Expertise. We're a consultancy here in Singapore. We do a wide array of marine consultancy, such as eCMID audits, but we also do other assurance activities, such as FMEAs and DP trials. So, as an overview, I want to give an ADI's perspective on a few things, especially eCMID. I don't want to cover all ground. I know you've discussed some of the things I want to discuss over the past couple of days, but I just want to give an overview of eCMID and how the principles of eCMID are being implemented on other assurance activities in the industry. So, as an overview, I want to discuss just a brief history of eCMID, what needed to be done about eCMID, and where we are now, the principles of where eCMID came from, how the eCMID standard is being incorporated in other areas of expertise in the industry. Specifically, I want to talk about the proposed IMCA DP assurance accreditation. I do want to just clarify that it is proposed. It's not a done deal, but it will happen. And it's work in progress, but there is a work group that has been assigned for a number of months now. And I just want to give you an overview of where they are and what an overview of things to come. And just some ideas on how eCMID and other standards can be developed further. So, the past. 2 questions. Who could carry out eCMID? And what was the format? Well, the answer to the first question, anybody. Anybody could rock up. We've heard the pizza man, the banker, the taxi driver. You could literally have an auditing company employ somebody, give them a crash course in auditing, send them on the ship, and away they went. The format, no standard format. All right, we had Word templates, we had Excel templates and things like that. Reports were being issued different fonts. Findings were being categorized as observations, recommendations, non-conformances, major non-conformances. Nobody knew really what some of that meant for some reports. For instance, I read a report once. It said it is recommended that the fire detection system is repaired because it's not working. So, how is that a recommendation? Subjective findings causing problems for vessel operators, especially. Let's have some examples. This is not required for this charter. This is not required for a vessel of this age. This is not required for a vessel of this tonnage. All subjective findings, and it was causing problems for vessel operators because charters were coming back and saying, hang on a minute, that should be a minimum requirement on any vessel, not just an offshore vessel. Instances where vessels were not being audited properly. So, as Joe said before, people were rocking up, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Very little detail on where they were coming from. Remember, CMIDs or eCMIDs or any SMS audit, if you want to call it that, is a snapshot of how that vessel is being operated, how their safety management is being managed. It's a snapshot. And in order to give somebody a snapshot, you need to provide a level of detail without going too much into the ins and outs of how things are done on board. So what happened then? OCIM, they developed the OVID based on the SIRE inspection program. It's a standardized audit format, like it or hate it. It's a standardized audit format. We've heard Joe mentioned before there were some nutting heads with IMCA about, standardizing audit formats, but essentially that's probably where it all stands. So what needed to be done? Well, as we know, there was no minimum qualifications or experience. Anybody could, taxi driver, pizza man, could do an audit. So that's an overview of the minimum qualifications or certifications required for an eCMID inspector and marine inspector of small workboats. Qualifications are not enough. You also need to demonstrate training and experience. Again, I don't want to go over all ground, but we've got examples here of what the AVI assessors are trying to look for. And here, qualifications, a recognised audit qualification. You can be the most qualified person in the world, but if you simply do not know how to go on board a vessel and conduct an audit in a constructive manner, then you're wasting your time. Training course is mandatory. So, okay, courses, we ran a course yesterday. You need a minimum level of assessment to complete the assessment process. So, you know, you'll see later on about examinations, etc., but course is mandatory, completes the assessment process. Continuous professional development, okay? Didn't used to have to do this. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I think it's a good thing. I mean, I'm a chartered engineer. I have to demonstrate this to the Engineering Council on demand. I have to record it. I record it as part of my AVI. It takes effort. It takes thought. It takes, you know, people should strive to develop themselves professionally. And that's an example. Obviously, we've seen the app this morning, which is a new thing, but examples of CPD. So where are we now? We've got a standardized format. You know, I think personally it's easier to fill out a standardized format, an online or a web-based electronic system than the old Word copies. I was never a whiz kid on Word or Excel, but standardized format, same font. Okay, we can insert pictures, we can put logos on a report, which is a marked difference to Ovid, but it's a standard. Promotes objectiveness. Before, you could just write anything you want. There's your findings, get on with it. Nobody really had a say. Now, within the database, the vessel operator has an opportunity to respond. And if any of you are Ovid inspectors, you can go back in and see what the operator's response is. And sometimes it's not very nice. So it makes you think that, you know, I need to be on the ball here. And it's a database, it's got an audit history. As Mike said before, full transparency, nothing wrong with that. Previously, as a legacy item, people didn't want to be transparent. So, coming to the proposed IMCA DP assurance accreditation. Dynamically positioned vessels, as we know, there's many of them. Supply boats, anchor handlers, diver support vessels with divers on the seabed, accommodation vessels with gangways connected to FPSOs, and deep water drilling vessels. You would expect, if the industrial mission of the vessel is a high risk, then the level of assurance is obviously high. But we're faced with the same problems today as we used to be with SEMA. No minimum qualifications for DP trials practitioners. Anybody could do it. Get him in the office, give him a crash course, take him a couple of DP trials, and away you went. Substandard trials being conducted. Okay? Basically, the standard that should be applied, or the guidance that IMCA provide on annual DP trials, for instance, the reports were just not being submitted in accordance with it. Causing big problems. Subjective findings, again, it was a big problem. Don't get me wrong, DP trials are subjective anyway. It's graded A, B, and C. Could it be better? Probably it could, but it's as good as we've got at the moment. But the level of findings that, you know, the vessel is not considered a DP3 vessel because it's not done reball analysis. It's ridiculous. But it's in the system. People want it to be closed out. It's ridiculous. Not providing the level of assurance required. As I said, there's no minimum qualifications and experience for some of these people that are out here. People are getting their reports, clients are getting their reports, they're kicking a vessel off hire and safely. Lack of understanding from company DP authorities. The person who's in the chair ashore, who's training the vessel, who's regulating internally dynamic positioning assurance, just hasn't got the understanding of what the industry demands out of these vessels. In that respect, it's very, very difficult to promote DP safety within the company, and more importantly, on board the vessel. And it's not consistent with vessel auditing accreditation such as eCMID. A colleague of mine at a workshop in November 2017 put his hand up and said, why do you need an accredited vessel inspector to do an eCMID, but you can send anybody to do a DP trial? It's a level of assurance. There should be something done about it. And there was. And IMCA have embraced it. And from their last workshop, the aims are to improve the consistency and conduct of DP trials, to set a minimum level of knowledge for DP subject matter experts. And the objectives: provide assurance that DP practitioners attending vessels for trials are accredited to a minimum standard, provide assurance that personnel conducting DP assurance duties in both operator and client offices are accredited to a minimum standard, and that we meet the requirement of a recently published OCINF white paper on DP assurance. That's not so recent anymore. That came out in 2016. But it did make people sit up and say, hang on a minute, the clients now expect you to employ people who are competent to do your DP assurance. Assisting DP trials practitioners and DP office-based personnel to maintain and increase their knowledge base. Again, the same message. So there's two proposed categories of accreditation. Company DP authority. This is the guy who's within the shipping company, or he typically works for the vessel operator or the client. Again, there's a level of competence required by this person. And a DP trials practitioner, that's somebody like me who comes from a third party, goes on board, trials your vessel. So that needs to be a person actively involved in performing FMEAs, FMEA crewing trials, DP annual trials. So, what do we need to say about competence of people that are doing these assurance activities? IMCA M103, guidance document, remember, says the owner operator is responsible that crews are suitably trained. And the company DP authority, in accordance with M117, suitably qualified, fulfills his terms of responsibility, first point of contact, leads DP training, verifies DPC time for personnel, and has a general knowledge of relevant IMCA guidance documentation. As explained previously, and to be brutally honest, in a lot of instances, this just isn't happening. Competence of persons developing DP trials programs in accordance with IMCA M190. IMCA M190 is the Bible for annual DP trials. Qualified engineer or master mariner. Mariner, I should say. Experience in development of at least one DP FMEA, witnessed at least 3 annual DP trials, got thorough knowledge of the applicable class rules, IMO, guidance, etc., etc. And is familiar with IMCA station keeping event database and has a knowledge of the operational and industrial function of the vessel. As I said previously, anybody could rock up. It wasn't, nobody had a responsibility to ensure that that person was competent. It was incumbent on the person who was employing the practitioners. So, what's being proposed? Familiar, deck officer regulator, STCW, or engine officer, or electrotechnical officer, or if you're a non-seafarer, HND, HNC, or equivalent. For the DP trials practitioner, again, same STCW, a technical qualification, HNC. Additionally, quality control auditing qualification or an IMCA AVI and DP trial supplement. Just because it's a trial, it's an audit. it's a method of insurance, should have the competence to go on board that vessel and conduct the audit in an appropriate manner. But minimum qualifications are not enough. Okay, candidates need to demonstrate a level of experience. Now, there's a lot of areas being kicked around in this, so I'm just going to generalise that 2 years adequate experience for both DP authorities and DP practitioners is what's being proposed. Now, from a DP authority point of view, that's 2 years experience as an engineering, electrical or marine superintendent, or 2 years experience as a master or chief engineer on a DP2, DP3 vessel, or somebody who's had at least 2 years experience training DP personnel. And similarly for, DP practitioners, 2 years experience conducting FMEAs, conducting FMEA proving trials, and doing a minimum level of annual DP trials. Don't get me wrong, especially from a DP practitioner perspective, we've already touched on this morning that there are barriers to mentoring people. So that needs to be closely managed. There will be a formal examination that's to be taken. Once you've proved that necessary experience and the minimum qualifications, there will be a formal examination that will be undertaken. It will consist of multi-choice questions relevant to the accreditation that's being applied for. You must demonstrate continuous professional development, such as attend an annual DP proving trial, attend an INCRO DP industry event, be involved in DP incident investigations, or contribute to INCRO or DP industry work group. So, how can eCMID develop further? All right, we've heard the opinions about paper today, don't get me wrong. I'm a fan of the digital age. I like the electronic system. Don't get me wrong, I like to print out my template before I go on an audit, and I like to write down what I'm doing on the audit. Don't get me wrong.
You can't do that.
No, but that's my opinion. Yeah. But I think I like the digital age. I do. But that's my opinion. It can be amended. I mean, we've got to keep up with the times. Again, this has already been discussed today, but it's an ever-changing environment, it's an ever-changing industry. We need to make sure that eCMID fits the future of shipping. It sets a standard. It does set a standard. Love it or hate it. But there are other audits, ROV and diving as an example, INCRO audits, that these audit formats, they don't call for a minimum level experience. They don't have a standardized format. You don't have to maintain CPD. So can it be can the same principles be adopted to that? I would say yes. Some parts of the industry need to embrace change. If we go back to paper is making a big comeback in Asia. I went on an audit a few weeks ago. I'd audited the vessel before 2 years ago. It had a vessel management system replicated. Everything was managed electronically. I went on board the vessel a few months ago, and there was files of paper everywhere. The fact remains is vessel owners are fighting for survival. They're cutting costs where they can. So I'm not criticising, but the digital age comes at expense. You know, paper is still adequate, but it's making a big comeback. So the standardised approach, summarised as follows. Minimum qualifications and experience. If you're doing any assurance activity, that is the minimum. Formal assessment to demonstrate competence, such as a course, an exam, etc. CPD keeps you on your toes. Standardised report formats. Again, there's differences of opinion. I'm all for standardising report formats. Sometimes it's not possible. In fact, When it comes to DP trial reports, there probably won't be a standardised report format. People will be able to develop their own formats as they do now. Don't get me wrong, there's minimum standards in INPRA 190 of what you should report on, but the format of it is different. And there should be a continual focus on positive change and improvement. To make this a success, we need to continuously improve. Any questions for me?
You've stunned everybody, Alex.
In a good way, I hope.
In a good way.
One question. Where does that put your average AVI?
Sorry?
Where does that put your average AVI guy? Where does this put your average AVI person? It doesn't apply, does it really?
No, no. What I'm saying is there's a standardised approach to everything in terms of assurance activities. AVI is a minimum standard. It's an accreditation for assurance activity. The industry has an array of assurance activities where there is no minimum standard.
Are you saying then that DP is going to align itself with the AVI scheme?
I'm saying the principles are going to be the same.
Yeah.
So, minimum requirements you saw there, and the formal auditing qualification, DPD, it's all the same message. It's the same problems and the same standards being applied.
So is it going to be IIMS? It's going to be the
Well, we've not got involved in a dialogue thus far,
No.
not a formal dialogue. And I think there's still work for the committee to do to move it to
Very
the
much
next
so.
level.
That's all got to be thrashed out.
But I would be very disappointed if we don't get the opportunity to pitch for it. But, you know, we'll have to wait and see.
So then you envisage the accreditation system will be something similar to AVI.
Yeah, very much so.
Mm. And it's a bit like we were talking earlier about not reinventing the wheel.
Yeah.
You know, we carry a lot of knowledge now, and I would have thought it's a different question set and it's a different process. Essentially, there is real commonality between the two, I would have thought. Who's driving this at IMCA?
Andy Goldman.
And it's Andy, yeah. Talk to Andy. Right, any more questions?